online, on the TuneIn app,
and on your smart speaker.
Play Shock Radio.
This is the sound of Salford.
Shock Radio News.
This is the Shock News at 7 o'clock. I'm Benny Fiddimore. US President Donald Trump has hit out at his Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelensky, in a scathing post on social media, calling him a dictator without elections. He's also criticised the US cash given to Ukraine since the Kremlin's invasion. President Zelensky says the White House is trapped in a disinformation space. A postman's been jailed for more than 6 years for a series of sexual assaults in Northumberland. The Royal Mail's ordered an independent review into 63-year-old Michael Stewart's offending. Airfares, non-alcoholic drinks, meat, bread and cereal are apparently behind an unexpected jump in inflation to 3% last month. It's the highest rate for almost a year. Emma Raducanu says she's proud of how she competed at the Dubai Tennis Championships after what she called a difficult experience yesterday. Organisers say a man displaying fixated behaviour approached her before he was removed by security. There's been another rise in the likelihood of an asteroid the size of a football pitch hitting Earth. Experts say there's a 3.1 chance that it will make impact in 2032, but stress that there's no need to panic.
Shock Radio weather.
And largely cloudy to start the evening, then outbreaks of rain arriving and continuing overnight. Heavy at times, lows of 6 degrees for Manchester. You're up to date at 7:04. This is the Shock News Show with Benny Fiddimore, Alfie Mulcahy and Noah Buckingham-Reed. And hello and good evening. And today's the show is going to be predominantly based around the news today about Ukraine. So let's get straight into it. Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, has consistently warned that Kyiv must have a seat at the negotiating table for any discussions about ending the war with Russia to have a chance of success. And his European allies also want to have a say. So this comes after Donald Trump said that it's possible that Ukraine may be excluded from negotiations. And now obviously Europe's getting involved. It seems as though Putin's also said that Ukraine can be involved. What are we thinking about this, Alfie?
I think it's really bizarre that we've ended up in the situation where we're even discussing the presence of Ukraine in talks like this. I mean, even when we saw the peace talks between the Israelis and the Palestinians a couple of months back, both of them were in the room. I think the very notion of discussing the ownership of territory, the ending of a war, without having both fighting parties present is a very, very odd move.
It's quite unique, isn't it? This isn't very regular in terms of a peace treaty. It's not normally an outside party getting involved. I mean, obviously this is America, so it's a big nation. But yeah, it's a bit unique. We don't normally see this happening. Noah, what would you like to add on that?
Well, I think it's just caused massive upheaval across Europe over the last week. It's been a massive story, and I think what happens now is that these European leaders are now waking up to the fact that this is very much the reality of a Trump America. This is the world that we live in. This is the new world, and as Zelensky described it, and we'll get onto later, a disinformation space. It's a battle between this new world of disinformation and of social media and of oligarchy and a whole new world, which Europe, it's still an older world maybe, but a new world that Europe is now trying to defend and figure out whether that's the world that they want to defend or whether the world that they're ready to step into is this Trump world.
So obviously now this war has been going on for 3 years, so it's better look at some of the context. So Russia occupies almost 25% of Ukraine's territory. Ukraine's defence has cost tens of thousands of lives to its citizens, and the country has in the past insisted that any peace deal include the full withdrawal of Russian troops from Ukrainian territory. This includes not only areas Russia has seized in its full-scale offensive, but also the Black Sea Peninsula of Crimea, which was annexed in 2014. The Ukrainian people feel their future is as uncertain as it was 3 years ago. Whatever form any peace talks take, Ukrainians want control over their own future, but the lack of Ukrainian representatives in Saudi Arabia, where they're going to be beginning these negotiations, has dismayed locals in Kyiv. So we've got a few vox pops of that right here.
What they're doing is crazy because it's our problem. If they don't want to talk straight with us, this is really strange.
I'm afraid it's not democracy already, but it is a power of strongest.
So there we go. We're hearing from some Ukrainians about how they feel about the situation. If we get into Europe, on Monday, European leaders met in Paris to discuss what's going on about these peace deals. So what do you think this is a sign of if Europe are getting involved now? Do you want to have a little chat about that?
Well, I think what we've seen in the past week is the European leaders respond in a way which I think will give hope to the idea that there is hope for this sort of European liberal democracy world to remain intact. What they've done is respond to the idea that there was going to be a negotiation for peace with the invading party. I mean, it's not often that you see that, but we saw that US were prepared to send envoys to Saudi Arabia to discuss with the Russians, and this was I think it's quite shocking to Europe, but this is not the way we've done diplomacy, and this is not the way, particularly, that America has done diplomacy. We saw J.D. Vance this week at the Munich Security Conference in Munich, and he was talking in a very different way in the way that we've seen America as a global leader and as a leader of this sort of liberal democracy world order. They've now completely torn that paper up. They've completely torn it up. And what happens now is that the European leaders, the big leaders, the Macrons, and now the Starmers, interestingly as well, are now stepping in. They've come together in Paris. And what this, I mean, answering to sort of your question of what this might mean, is that there is still a way for the European leaders to act together, but it is sort of getting to a point where it's a crunching point.
Alfie, do you have anything to add on that?
Well, it's a really difficult situation because obviously America is a big ally of Europe, a big ally of the EU, and contributes more money than any other country towards defence leagues like NATO. So whilst it's very easy for the EU leaders to say, hang on, wait a minute, step back and let us deal with this conflict on our own, give us a little bit more autonomy over it, America is so involved because of the amount of money that they are giving to NATO and giving to the defence of Europe.
So, Keir Starmer is hoping to be a bridge between the European leaders and Trump's White House, who is obviously berating Europe about their defence spending. So what do you think? Are you surprised that Keir Starmer seems to be taking a slightly different role to America? I mean, he said he's offered to put UK troops on the ground in Ukraine in part of that role that he wants to play in the continued peace talks. So do you think it's a bit odd seeing the UK having a different approach to America when normally with allies and we stick together on these matters?
Well, we spoke about this a few weeks back during the tariffs, that President Trump wasn't really including the EU and the UK in the same category. He was talking very ill of the EU, but then going, well, the UK is potentially a bit more malleable. We can potentially get them to agree a little bit more with us. I think this is Keir Starmer still acting in that position of being stuck between the EU and the US. Obviously, we voted to leave the EU. The US is a big partner, as is the EU, and we're looking both ways at in this argument that's sort of developing.
He's got this job that no one wants. He's got this position in this negotiation. Nobody wants to be there. He's had to come in quite strongly and sort of combat these criticisms that Starmer and this Labour government wouldn't be a strong ally to an incoming Trump presidency. He's cut that rumour down completely. He's been a key cooperator. He's quite surprisingly, had quite a good relationship with Trump. Trump actually, I think he quite likes him. But there is now this crunching point where it is a choice between the long-standing EU allies of the UK, trade partners, allies in defence, allies in sort of all aspects of like the world order, this sort of multilateral liberal democracy world order. That's now being torn apart. But whether Starmer has to now sort of stand on either side of that, or whether he stands in the middle, but it's quite a tipping point to stand on, and it could sort of come back to bite him a little.
Do you two think that Keir Starmer could probably be like the most crucial person in this whole sort of negotiations? Because obviously he's got the US links, he's got the European links. Do you think he could end up being like one of the lead characters in these peace deals, or do you think it'll be just stuck to the US and Russia and doing it on their own over in Saudi Arabia?
I think it could go one of two ways. The UK will either be the sort of impartial mediating party, or will be in that awkward position of sucking up to the EU or sucking up to the US, trying to please both of them. And it's up to Keir Starmer and it's up to Peter Mandelson as well to get to get their act together and decide how they're going to play it, really.
Sort of in a less like ideological terms, thinking about this in a very sort of logical aspect. If he takes the stance where American involvement isn't the priority for this deal, he doesn't want that to be sort of the driving factor in how peace is achieved in Ukraine, then the responsibility goes on to the European leaders which he met in Paris. What that means is that if the US step back, there is billions and billions of pounds in black hole funding, which then becomes a massive problem for Ukraine and could quite easily sort of become quite a deciding factor. If the US step out in the way that they're looking like they don't want to be much involved in this, then I think, like logistically speaking, it means there has to be a massive step up in defence spending. It's been called for. Labour has set out a plan which says that they want to get from the 2.3% of GDP currently spent on defence up to the 2.5%. Do the rest of the Europeans match that? Is this a new sort of idea where he can get the European world on the side of defence and sort of push aside the importance of America? Are we giving too much like space for America to control this European battle? Is there a space where we could see the European allies, this allyship, step up to defend Ukraine without American money?
Well, NATO's been pushing for 3% from lots of its bigger members, but the US they're wanting 5 out of the UK and other countries as well, which is more than double what it currently is. And you look at our health service, our public transport infrastructure, all of our public bodies, they're struggling as they are. And lots of people will see the announcement to raise it from 2.3 to 2.5 as the government not doing enough on issues at home.
Well, obviously, we keep being reminded about the £22 billion black hole in public services, so it would be interesting to see how the UK public would respond to this increase in defence spending, whilst, of course, as you say, our services at home are under immense pressure. But what is clear is that the UK are committing to spend more money, so it's clear that the UK still has the same motto as they had before the Trump administration came in, and that is to support Ukraine. So let's have a look at what's going on in the negotiations. So on Tuesday, the US and the Russians met in Saudi Arabia. Putin has stated that his main conditions for starting negotiations to end the war are the recognition of Russian-occupied Ukrainian territories, the lifting of sanctions on Russia, and denial of Ukraine's request to join NATO. Do we think these are terms that the Ukraine will agree to in a peace deal?
Well, I think they would tell you absolutely not. This is not the way that people envisioned this war going, and I tell you, the Ukrainians don't want the war going on as much as the Russians maybe now don't either, with the amount of lives lost. But I think at sort of the very heart of this is the fact that this is essentially answering all the requests that Putin made at the start of the war. It's a giving up of sovereign land, as I've mentioned before. And what this does is essentially say, Putin, yes, come in, walk into our sovereign European land, take what you want, fight your war. You don't even have to win this war. We'll give it to you. What then is the deterrent for him to not go further, to not look towards his previous sort of spheres of influence, which he had in his in Soviet Russia, and what stops him now from going? Oh, I like the Eastern European states, and he wants influence over them again. What is the deterrent?
And it's sending a message to other countries as well that if you do invade another country with the intention of taking land, that you're not going to be
we'll give it to you.
Tackled as much as you would have been 5-10 years ago.
Right.
So we'll listen to the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov. He said he would first and foremost like to listen to the American proposals on ending the conflict in Ukraine.
We need to stop actions of Kiev regime, which are aimed at killing everything that has got to do with Russia, so religion, Russian culture, economic ties and so on. So the tasks that were set by the presidents are large-scale tasks.
So there we go, that was Lavrov there explaining what he wants.
It's not too surprising that you'll find that he's willing to first and foremost listen to these US proposals, because these US proposals are massively in favour of what the Russians wanted in the first place. And what the talking points coming out of America now are 2-3 years ago Kremlin talking points, and these are now coming out of the US. And what this means is that they're getting exactly what they want. Why would they not want to have that discussion? But hopefully what Europe can do here is say that there's not going to be a negotiation without at least Ukraine, if not Europe, at the table.
And what do you two think about, does it seem as though America, new president, they've seemed to have kind of flipped sides of the argument a little bit. It seems like they're backing Russia more than they're backing Ukraine now, doesn't it, a little bit? Do you think?
I'd say what we've learned from the start of this Trump presidency is that there is sort of this new, and I'll say it again, there is a new world order. And it's not one where there is sort of a basis now. And what is happening is that they are trying to spread this into Europe as well, where every country is of its own, where every country is an isolationist, where sort of international court and law are sanctioned, where truth is questioned and disinformation, and the truth becomes people's truths, right? These are not straight facts anymore. We can't work off facts. This is what America wants to bring to Europe, and I think what Europe have to do is explain to the people why that isn't a good idea. And I think perhaps maybe that Starmer might have had a good week this week, because Reform, or people like Reform, have not been able to answer those questions about sovereignty and Ukraine. And if you can take a strong stance that somebody like Starmer would go ahead and protect the sovereignty of European land and protect the European democracy, essentially, I think it is a protection of democracy at its heart, and that is what I think can be sort of promised here in this sort of new world where it's kind of split.
So, of course, Ukraine, we're just going to finish off here with a story, well, the tweet that Trump's put out. He said that, think of it, a modestly successful comedian, Volodymyr Zelensky, talked the United States of America into spending $350 billion to go into a war that couldn't be won, that never had to start, but a war that he, without the US and Trump, will never be able to settle. The US has spent $200 billion more than Europe, and Europe's money is guaranteed, while the United States will get nothing back. Why didn't sleepy Joe Biden demand equalization? In that this war is far more important to Europe than it is to us. We have a big, beautiful ocean of separation. On top of this, Zelensky admits that half of the money we sent him is missing. He refuses to have elections, is very low in Ukrainian polls, and the only thing he was good at was playing Biden like a fiddle. A dictator without elections, Zelensky better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. So, any final thoughts? Obviously, Trump not praising Zelensky at all here. This is very, again, going against him and, sort of criticising him. Just any final things?
I think it's massively heated up today, this sort of back and forth between Zelensky and Trump. But I think it's worth that we make sure that this is sort of doesn't go unfact-checked. I mean, there is parts in there which I think need to be questioned on the actual numbers and sort of the statements which have been made. And it is sort of a hit-back Trump-like response of Zelensky hitting out and saying the US is living in a space of disinformation. So it's in a very Trump way that he can almost say what he likes and get away with it.
Alfie, you got anything to add?
Well, he's saying that Zelensky's approval rating is 4% among the Ukrainian population, but there was an opinion poll done last month, and lots of others, that put him between 55 and 60% support from Ukrainians, which for a president that's been in the job for as long as he has, is incredibly high.
I can tell you who a dictator is. Trump's best friend, Trump's best friend, Putin.
Right. So we're going to move on from Ukraine now and have a look at the other stories that are dominating the headlines today. So we've had a sinkhole in Surrey. So a large sinkhole was opened up in a Surrey village, forcing a major incident to be declared. A part of Godstone High Street closed after a water pipe burst. So this is obviously going to cause a lot of disruption. So yes, any thoughts on that?
Well, I was listening to the radio this morning, and they had interviewed a woman whose house was right on the edge of the sinkhole, opening up just a few metres from her front door, and she'd said that it was like being in a movie. She'd opened her door, and the ground wasn't there. It felt like she was floating in the air.
So it was kind of like a out-of-this-world sort of experience. Well, residents are being urged to avoid the area, and experts are investigating what might have caused a large sinkhole to form. A small number of buildings are evacuated, and there's 100 metres of area cordoned off. And we've got a little clip from the council. This is Catherine Sire from Tambridge District Council explaining what they're doing to help the situation.
Initially we said to talk to your insurance company, but some insurance companies have been more helpful than others. But anybody who hasn't got anywhere to go, if they come to us, the District Council, we should be able to help them out.
So obviously a very difficult situation for all of those in Tandridge this afternoon. A resident nearby, Sarah Dennis, told Sky News her home's water supply has been cut off even when she lives around half a mile away. And she's also said that there was a slight sinkhole in the same place back in 2019. And this is located just next to the M25, so we could be seeing a bit of disruption in the coming days.
Yeah, I think that could be a major point. This is right near the M25, and I think what was found out is that it was understood that this sort of area was built on a sand quarry, that there's actually potentially caves underneath the area. So now this is potentially not just an issue which is going to affect this sort of immediate area, but it's something that's probably should be looked at on a wider scale in that area and by the M25, which could face major disruption, especially if, we're seeing half a mile away that water's being cut off. There could be sort of problems with services and a proper deeper look into this.
And there's also kind of wider point to be made here. If water did have something to play with this, if there was a slow leak over a period of time seeping into the earth beneath and causing it to collapse like that, Britain is made of lots of old pipework. Gas, water are being delivered in some pipework over 100 years old, some piping lots older than that. And if it's not kept in check, if it's not repaired frequently, we'll end up with lots more incidents like this.
So it obviously creates lots of questions for the water companies once more. So we're going to finish the show now with one more story, and we've had some heavy discussions today, but this is something a bit more light-hearted. So in the Glasgow 10K, runners were treated to a prank after a woman sent them on a mile-long detour pretending to be a marshal. So they ended up running 12.5K. I don't know, do you two run at all?
No.
Give us some wisdom on some running.
That's my thing, is it? Okay.
Yeah, go on then. Drop us some wisdom. Would you be mad if somebody directs you off in the wrong way? I'd be fuming, personally.
I think it would be a mental torture. But yeah, do you two find that quite funny? Would you be up to doing anything like that?
You know what?
Or can you not say? Can you not tell us?
Sometimes I do find some marathon runners like to flex their achievements. And they're making me feel so bad. So you know what? I'd send them off in the wrong direction. Sure, give them an extra mile to run. They can get it on their Strava or whatever they use. Is that for running? I think that's running. There you go.
So having a little fun, but perhaps...
When I was reading this earlier, what I saw is that she'd buried the signs under the ground.
It's meticulously planned.
So she'd got a shovel and she'd buried these directional signs under a mound of earth.
Very creative, and it has happened to me once. Somebody did move a sign and end up in a field somewhere.
Well, it's
Goodness
true
knows what
behaviour.
happens.
You must have to really hate somebody in that run. To
absolutely.
Be like, off you go.
Well, thank you for listening to the news show. I've been Benny Fiddimore. I've been joined by Alfie Mulcahy and Noah Buckingham-Reed, and we're just going to get some headlines to end the show. Right, let's do this. So, US President Donald Trump has hit out as his Ukrainian counterpart in a scathing post on social media, calling him a dictator without elections. He's also criticised the US cash given to Ukraine since the Kremlin's invasion. President Zelensky says the White House is trapped in a disinformation space. A postman's been jailed for more than 6 years for a series of sexual assaults in Northumberland. The Royal Mail's ordered an independent review into 63-year-old Michael Stewart's offending. Airfares, non-alcoholic drinks, meat, bread and cereal are apparently behind an unexpected jump in inflation to 3% last month. It's the highest rate for almost a year. Emma Raducanu says she's proud of how she competed at the Dubai Tennis Championships after what she called a difficult experience yesterday. Organisers say a man displaying fixated behaviour approached her before he was removed by security. There's been another rise in the likelihood of an asteroid the size of a football pitch hitting Earth. Experts say there's a 3.1 chance it will make an impact in 2032, but stress there's no need to panic.
Shock Radio weather.
And it's largely cloudy to start the evening, then outbreaks of rain arriving and continuing overnight. Heavy at times, lows of 6 degrees for Manchester. And that was your Shock News Show with Benny Fiddimore, Noah Buckingham-Reed and Alfie Mulcahy, produced by Luke Jones, directed with Shock TV by Will Valentine. Shock Radio News returns tomorrow.